Thank you, Megan. We're recording this meeting. Do you want to go ahead and pull up the slides, Megan? The intro slides. So today is our annual meeting of the Commercial Community Involvement Organization. Next slide. We're doing it on Zoom because it's just more convenient, and also we have COVID concerns still. I'd like to introduce members of our board. Scott Miller, do you want to say hi so you pop up on the screen?
Hi.
Scott is our Vice President Land Use Officer. And Chris Tunstall, do you want to say hi?
Sure. Hello.
Chris has been on the board since the beginning, and she is our general board member. And then Robert Kellogg, do you want to say hi?
Hello, everybody.
Robert is our secretary, or will be our secretary after this meeting. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And I just want to give an overview. An overview on instructions, and Megan's going to handle this part. Megan, go for it.
Everybody, Megan George with the City of Tualatin. A couple of Zoom reminders. I'm sure most of us have spent half of our lives on Zoom the last couple of years, but keep yourself on mute. That'll ensure that we can hear those who are presenting. We're going to ask you to put questions in the chat box, which can be accessed in the bottom of your screen. There should be a little icon that says chat, and you can type your questions in there during the presentations, or feel free to hold those until the end and we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. And lastly, the CCIO would like to keep in touch. So they're asking for you to submit your email address so that they can add you to their email list. There's a few ways to do that. You can either put it in the chat box, or if you'd rather submit that privately, feel free to text it to me at the number on the screen or email it to me. And I'll include this information in the chat box so you can access it throughout the meeting as well.
Thank you, Megan. Next slide. I just want to go over the agenda today. We really have one subject, and that's the URA and the TIF, and we have experts with us tonight, or this afternoon, to go over the details. Before they do, I'm going to just outline briefly what our volunteer group's participation has been in the working group that is currently looking at different aspects of this project. Following the presentation of our experts, we're going to have a very short business meeting, which will be our election. And then our next plan meeting is mid-September. And right now, the same subject, the URA, is tentatively the agenda. Next slide. Okay, the city has formed a working group. I'm participating as a representative of the Commercial CIO, as is the chamber and other CIOs, the residential CIO programs. We've met a couple times. We're going to meet one more time, I think, or maybe two. We've been going over the city's draft plan, including the areas that might be included in this URA, the strengths, the weaknesses of the different groups, what opportunities might be, and what we'll call threats or things that could cause projects to go sideways. No projects have been selected. This entire thing needs city council approval. This is just a concept right now, and I know Jonathan is going to, Don Hudson and Elaine are going to be taking you through the details, but I've been asked to just kind of give an idea of what the scope is. Right now, they're talking about $85 million maximum amount. They've identified goals, which they're running by this working group, blight, transportation, multi-use housing, community identity, and assistance for small developers. These amounts were proposed to the working group. They don't add up to the 85 million because there's other costs that are associated, and we're just in a discussion phase. I'm looking for feedback from our members who will be on this call or will get a report afterwards of this meeting. Any feedback you would like me to share with the city would be fantastic. But more importantly, if you have a project that you think might qualify in one of these categories, you'll want to contact the city directly. That's Jonathan Taylor, who you'll meet here in a few minutes. I'll be posting updates on our website, which I've included there, which is the tualatincio.org/commercial-CIO. So that we'll be having periodic updates. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Jonathan Taylor. Do you want to go ahead and pull up Jonathan's slides? And I'm going to turn the meeting over to Jonathan and crew, and they're going to be taking you through the 101 on the urban renewal and everything associated with it. Jonathan, you ready?
Yeah. All right. So does everyone see that slide?
Yep.
So first of all, good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Taylor. I am the Economic Development Manager, and on behalf of the city, I also want to introduce our consultant, Elaine Howard from Elaine Howard Consulting, and then our Assistant City Manager and Finance Director, Don Hudson. And this is kind of the core team that's been working on urban renewal since 2018. Elaine has been with us since the beginning of 2018, as well, obviously, as Don. So like I said, that's us. But basically, over the last 5 years, the city, through various efforts, whether that's through community development or public works or parks and rec, have been in a multi-year endeavor to continually position our community for long-term economic prosperity. And then in 2020, the dramatically changing landscape due to the COVID-19 pandemic really further prioritized these efforts. In 2018, 2019, and 2020, the city of Tualatin started focusing on parks and rec development, on Tualatin 2040, which were required by Oregon state statute to come up with a housing needs assessment and our economic opportunities assessment, which basically means, does the city have enough land for projected residential growth and economic landscape growth over the next 20 years as required by law? So we have to have land for the projected growth. That's Oregon land use. So we understood with community growth, development constraints present challenges for our community's long-term economic prosperity. The availability of developable land and transportation infrastructure is limited or severely restricted. We learned from our community gathering feedback in 2019 and 2020, as well with our urban renewal efforts in Basalt Creek, transportation still continues to rank high of community priorities. But then the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns and the supply chain issues have created further opportunities as well as challenges as our community continues to transition to more of a electronic commerce and supply chain issue management. So basically today, we're going to be talking about the core opportunity and reinvestment area. And the purpose of that is to utilize a variety of financial tools to meet the community needs in alignment with the broader community vision. And a little bit of background. So beginning in 2018, the city of Tualatin conducted the Tualatin 2040 project. And some of you are also on that advisory committee, as well as some of our stakeholder interviews. Moving into 2019, council indicated they were looking to finance potential projects, community development that didn't increase the tax burden on the residents. And so with Elaine's help, beginning in 2019, we launched the Phased Opportunity Project, which had 5 phases. And phase 1 began in 2019 with an education series, kind of like what we're experiencing tonight, but it was for council and it was broken into 4 parts. Also in 2019, we officially closed CURD. And it's a little confusing because in 2019, or excuse me, in 2020, let me get my dates right. In 2010, the Central Urban Renewal District stopped collecting tax increment finance. So technically it was not an active taxing district. However, due to some administrative things that we needed to do, which was transfer properties that currently were owned by the Urban Renewal Agency, as well as some outstanding non-tax increment finance, we were able to close it in 2019. And then in 2020, council indicated that they wanted to move forward with the Basalt Creek development area, as well as look at the potential of new development in the downtown core and along I-5. So we did those feasibility studies in 2020. Moving into 2021, we also added the Herman Road Extension Project, which is a $3 million transportation project on Herman Road in the Leventon tax increment district. And then we moved into visioning for District 2, which is what this was, or what we're going to be talking about tonight. And then council adopted the Basalt Creek Development Area Plan in November of 2021. And now in 2022, we're working hard on behalf of council to look at what we're going to propose tonight. And this is one of 7 community groups that we have met with so far, and we intend to meet with more as the next couple of months go on. So this is just an initial discussion of the proposed boundary, the goals, the priorities, etc. And it's also a council priority to have robust community engagement to make sure that the next plan document that we adopt in November represents not only council's priorities, but also the broader community vision. This really isn't a visioning document per se, because a lot of prior strategic work has went into what we're going to be deriving off of, as well as moving forward. We have a downtown design guidelines. We have a town center plan. In the future, I'm sure it will be updated with changing economic landscapes. Obviously, land use is going to be looked at, but there's a foundation. There was a central urban renewal area in this proposed study area since 1975. This will be kind of a baseline of what we have to do. Obviously, Tualatin tomorrow was done in 2009 and updated in 2014, and then most recently the Tualatin Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Right now, this is our proposed working vision statement. We have a second draft in process based on our feedback from our working group, but as of right now, the vision is as such that area plan document will be a guiding document on our community's efforts to establish and fund projects to create an active civic core, redevelop areas with vibrant, high-quality mixed-use developments, offering a variety of additional residential dwelling and retail options, increase opportunities for living wage professional and creative employment, promote and develop recreational and cultural facilities, and integrate all efforts into the natural landscape with environmental stewardship. These were taken from the 5 previous documents that we talked about and kind of aggregated into one, but our working group says it's too long. So we are going to go back and we're going to kind of retailer that to a more succinct vision, but it's a good starting point of what we're trying to do for the broader community. In 2020 and 2021, earlier this year, staff held a number of small group interactions, whether it was one-on-one or larger Zoom meetings, as well as small group briefings with our city council. And these are some of the values and priorities that have been identified. More housing. I think our entire region is experiencing a housing issue, and that's no different than what Tualatin faces. It's very important to council that we leave no existing business behind, especially those that have survived and now are starting to prosper even more since COVID-19. Enhance connectivity, whether that be multimodal transportation, parking, access to natural life amenities, etc. Foster, create, enhance, and promote a community identity. In Tualatin 2040, that was the #1 thing we kept hearing was Tualatin lacks an identity. And there are various approaches to establishing that, but that is a priority for both council and the community. Maintain and grow existing employment lands. We are 141 acres shy of what is needed for industrial land growth in the city of Tualatin. So we don't have that much acreage that we could tap into in the urban growth boundary. So we have to focus on redevelopment or employee dense development. And we must make sure that everyone has equal access to the prosperity economically and quality of life that we intend to do in the future. Priorities, there are 8 small business assistance, land acquisition, housing, developer assistance, community identity, environmental stewardship, blight remediation, and transportation. And eventually these priorities will be transitioned into areas of investment. For example, the priority of transportation could include realignment of certain intersections that provide safe access, not only for traffic flow, but also pedestrian access. Housing could be a project that inspires housing within the area, such as what's going on in Basalt Creek. I think everyone is wanting to know where we're looking at. So this is the area that our feasibility studied in terms of what is required by ORS 457, but also what is allowed in terms of what is deemed blight. And we can get into that later under the TIF section, but this is the area that we looked at. And each of these areas we have broken down to our working group. Upper left near Bridgeport, which is the far section on the left-hand side, beside the red line, which is I-5, that's quadrant 1. That area was included at the time of 2019-2020 because the city was preparing and planning on the Southwest Corridor being established or built. And so we wanted to make sure that the city of Tualatin had a presence at the table when funding mechanisms were going to be discussed on that development. Quadrant 2 is the quadrant immediately to the right of that, kind of the antler of the moose per se, near where Dix and McEwen Road are. That area was included because that is a light industrial area, and employment land densification and also transportation access was a primary factor on that one. I think everyone knows that the bottom left, quadrant 3, is where our town center is. That is included because, one, transportation is an issue here, as well as a variety of projects and programs that the community has said that they either wanted, desired, or want studied. That was included for those obvious reasons. And then quadrant 4, which is on the other side of I-5, adjacent to the town center area, we included that because of, one, at the time of this plan being studied, the RV Park of Portland site was not being developed and hadn't had a plan to be developed. So obviously those factors are changed, and we're looking at that for potential boundary readjustment, as well as trail development and environmental mitigation, i.e. flooding, new medical office building development, and as well as those 2 vacant lots right there, so potential housing. It is important to note that our boundary is currently being readjusted, relooked at for multiple options, not only for the working group to consider, but also council in August. So this is just the initial area. So what we can say is we will not be adding to this area. The only other options will be shrinking the size if changes are to be made. Like I was noting earlier, why this area? Because of transportation, it is important that we focus on keeping future development near major transportation modes. So any new transportation, or excuse me, any new project development that is to occur should be kept close to already existing major infrastructure for transportation. So it prevents increase in traffic through our neighborhoods. Enhance current employment lands by increasing capacity, prepare for major regional transportation projects, remedy areas that are prone to environmental issues like flooding, enhance existing connectivity or provide new connectivity. That is one thing we hear a lot from not just Kathy, but also most of our businesses downtown, is we aren't visible enough to the Main Street traffic. So how do we provide new connectivity that enhances not only traffic flow, but also visibility and safety? Fund major new transportation improvement projects for future growth, but also leverage area for those needs. And then most of all this is based on previous community needs and desires derived from past and previous strategic planning processes. I'm going to turn it over to Elaine just to briefly go through how urban renewal is funded and how it's kind of structured in a way that is allowed by ORS 457.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. So this slide says why use TIF, TIF. TIF is called tax increment funds or tax increment financing. And I will explain as we go through the next few slides what tax increment financing actually is. This slide just talks about why to use it. And cities use this because they have existing city plans like the ones that Jonathan referred to. They have existing projects, but they have no funding source for those projects. So they use urban renewal or tax increment financing as that funding source to be able to complete projects that have already been identified. It provides money to pay for infrastructure to service housing, industry, and commercial centers. It is a mechanism for stimulating economic growth and creating jobs. And in some projects, it can provide a funding source to bridge the gap between what is a financially feasible project or not financially feasible. Next. This map just shows some of the cities in Oregon that have used urban renewal, and you can see in the Portland metropolitan area, it is widely used. You can also see that some cities, for example, the city of Wilsonville, that was when they had their TIF zone. So that number has decreased, but they are a big user of urban renewal. But your neighboring cities like Sherwood also have urban renewal areas, as do most of the metropolitan areas. Next slide. This just shows how tax increment finance works. So when we all pay our property taxes in November, that property tax revenue goes to the different taxing jurisdictions. Those taxing jurisdictions are the city, the county, the school district, metro. Those property taxes in Oregon go up for two different reasons. They go up because of the ability by the assessor to increase assessed values by 3% annually, as long as real market values are increasing, and due to either new construction or substantial improvements. That's how our regular property tax system works in Oregon. Next slide. When a city develops an urban renewal area, the assessor takes the assessed value within that area and forms what's called a frozen base assessed value. All of the property taxes off of that, so that's represented by the blue within this graphic, continue going to all of the different taxing jurisdictions. The growth in that area, represented by the blue arrow going to the left, the taxes off of that growth will go to the Urban Renewal Agency to fund projects and programs within that urban renewal area only. The important thing to remember about that is that it's just for the urban renewal area. The rest of the growth within the city continues going to all of the different taxing jurisdictions. So it does not change that. The other thing to remember is it doesn't change anyone's individual tax amount that they owe. It just redistributes how that money is allocated. So instead of that growth going to the different taxing jurisdictions, that growth will go to the Urban Renewal Agency. Next slide. To be able to establish an urban renewal area in Oregon, you have to say that it is blighted, and blight is officially defined in the statute that governs urban renewal. It is typically under development or underutilization of property. inadequacy of infrastructure, including streets and utilities. So that can mean a transportation system that either doesn't work well because it's overburdened or doesn't have appropriate pedestrian or bicycle amenities, or doesn't have appropriate widths to it. And it can also mean poor condition of buildings. There are other definitions of flight, but typically in Oregon, these are the three conditions that are cited when a new urban renewal area is formed. An urban renewal area is similar to a city budget. It has an income source. That income source, again, is that property tax collections based on growth of assessed value within the boundary area. It has expenses that are projects, programs, and administration. It has to develop a budget every year, just like the city develops a budget. And it has a spending limit. So this is unique to urban renewal. It is capped by a term called maximum indebtedness. When you establish an urban renewal area, you have to establish what that maximum indebtedness will be at the time that you adopt an urban renewal plan. So it is the amount of money that you plan on spending on projects, programs, and administration over the full life of an urban renewal area, which can be 25 to 30 years. This just shows the concept of tax increment financing in a different visual. It shows that gray bar across the bottom. That is the assessed value of all the properties within an urban renewal area at the time it's formed. And again, the taxes off that go to all the taxing jurisdictions. It shows in blue the increment over time. That increment means that increase in assessed value and the taxes off of that. That's termed increment. Urban renewal area usually completes all its projects within the time frame, pays off its debt. When it expires, shown by that gray bar along the right, all of that increased assessed value goes back on the regular taxing roll, and all of the taxing districts will see a jump in their tax revenues as a result of the ability to concentrate your funding and increase assessed value within the urban renewal area. The impacts of urban renewal, again, are not on individual property owners. The impacts are on the taxing districts. Urban renewal does not provide new money. It diverts funds that would otherwise go to other property taxing districts. Again, they continue receiving taxes on frozen base. They temporarily can be 25 to 30 years, forego taxes on growth. And in many times that growth may not have occurred, but for the ability of urban renewal to provide those key infrastructure improvements that allow property to redevelop. Schools are a little different than, you see my little note on there. That's an internal note. Let's see.
Hold on. We got the wrong slide up, guys. I apologize.
Anyway, I'll go through schools. Schools are funded a little differently. They are funded through the state school fund, which is funded on a per pupil basis by the Oregon legislature when it meets every 2 years. All of our school districts receive that amount of money for every student that they have within their schools. Urban renewal has an impact on the amount of money that goes to the state school fund, but the legislature is able to backfill that state school fund with other funding sources to make sure that there is enough money in the state school fund to allocate funding on that per pupil basis. This shows, instead of that direct cost of money going straight to the taxing district, this shows how the state school fund works. It is very complicated, but what we need to understand from this slide is that the local property tax revenues come in at the top, and the state school fund is funded through other sources and equalized both by state general funds, lottery funds, and other funding sources, including federal funds. So that our schools are not impacted directly by urban renewal. And that's always important for all of our communities who so value education. There are statutory limitations on urban renewal for cities with a population under 50,000. Only 25% of your assessed value may be in an urban renewal area and 25% of your acreage. So anything up to that 25% limitation. Once you have an existing urban renewal plan, it may not be increased in size by more than 20% of the original plan acreage. So if it's a 200-acre plan, 20% of that would be 40 acres, and that would be the total amount over the life of the plan that you could ever increase it by acreage. That maximum indebtedness, which is that spending limit, may not be increased by more than 20% of the original maximum indebtedness that's identified when you originally adopt your plan as indexed by inflation, unless you get taxing district concurrence of 75% of the permanent rate levy taxing districts. That usually is made up of the city, the county, the school district, and the fire district.
Okay.
Already covered that one.
So I want to break real quick and have questions asked, because that's a lot of information right at the beginning instead of doing the entire presentation. And then there's just a bunch of questions at the very, very end, because we'll move into plan timeline and overview and objectives of the plan.
Who's the moderator? Kathy, is that you?
Jonathan, why don't you go ahead and moderate, but I'm
Okay.
looking at chat and I don't see any questions in chat, but does anyone, okay, Robert Kellogg's got a question.
Yes, thank you. Elaine, Jonathan, good to see both of you. Glad to see you're still hard at work on this. Two quick questions. You mentioned 25% of the city's acreage was the limit. So when you add Basalt Creek and what we're thinking about here downtown, where does that put us at in terms of percentage?
23%.
23. Okay. And then with respect to the Basalt Creek plan that was adopted by council, what was the response from the other permanent levy taxing districts? Was it generally positive, or were there some obstacles to overcome?
So the only obstacle that we had was there was a disagreement on one particular project, but all of our taxing districts were in support of this.
Wonderful.
Or of Basalt Creek.
And you have a preview for their thoughts on what we're proposing here?
So far, because we're really focusing on mixed use development, housing and transportation, our taxing districts do have some issues, and we've addressed those. In fairness, we can say to this group, our feasibility study projected $140 million of tax increment revenue. And through discussions, not only with your council, Councilor Kellogg, but also with current council, as well as our taxing districts, we are proposing right now between 80 and 85 million. So roughly a little over half, in order to not have that large of an impact on our taxing districts. And through those discussions, they're actually very amenable so far with that.
Good. And then with respect to the 4 quadrants, are those all under consideration? Is there one that is rising to the top, one that's fallen to the bottom? Any discussion on that?
So I can say one that has fallen to the bottom is the quadrant 2, which is up there near Dick's, Safeway, and McEwen Road. If we only have a limited time frame of whatever the plan document allows, and we haven't settled on that time frame yet, but it's, could we spend an additional 15 years focusing on the areas where it matters most to the community, or do we divert just a little bit more capacity to areas where it's not that important? And it's also important to note that if that quadrant or parts of those quadrants aren't included, but yet in the future we need to refocus on those, because we've shrunk the district, it does not limit this community to explore that option in the future. So we want to make sure that we leave the option open for any potential discussion on development if need be, if something happens in the future where you need to focus like an infrastructure issue or et cetera. But right now it's that quadrant is not looking like it's going to be considered in the future for
Okay, and then-
this plan.
Yeah, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, so I'm just going to ask one more question. On quadrant 4, it looks like there are a lot of wetlands and other environmental concerns. I'm sure we've done our diligence on that. Where are we?
So that's one of the reasons why we are doing the plan document, is because of any new development as well as current development for mitigation of environmental constraints. We're including planning and foundational aspects of those considerations as well. So it's the businesses along Nyberg. That is one of the reasons why they're like, you know, we get flooded when it rains, especially this last year with the atmospheric rivers, as well as that intersection right there that goes from Nyberg up into the Best Buy. We are coming from the Lazy Boy side. Everyone is complaining that it's not safe. So there's a whole transportation environmental constraints, and talking to our transportation and our public works sections for the city. In order to do that, we would have to do environmental impacts on any kind of remedy of those developments, and that would be included in this plan. So it's kind of like putting the egg before the chicken and the cart before the horse, but it's also putting the horse before the cart because you have to fund it. So, because those are expensive.
Yeah.
I'd like to mention on quadrant 2, the city does plan to reach out to property owners, and where it falls ultimately will be how that discussion goes. Plus, quadrant 2 could be a north-south situation where the south portion of quadrant 2 may have more opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So just again, want to encourage businesses to reach out to the city and give them your direct viewpoint. Is that okay, Jonathan?
Yeah, that's actually, that's pretty good. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Jonathan.
Excuse me, I got allergies up the wazoo, so I'm really dying here. But on the housing and transportation, what is your eye towards affordable housing? I saw some correlation as if housing and then some of the development to bring jobs. And as we know, right now there's a zillion jobs, but not enough people. And part of the reason there's no people is because it's so unaffordable. Even the apartments, even places that are like Todd Village, that used to be kind of the affordable havens, are no longer affordable. They've doubled, if not tripled in price. So what we're having here is not a problem, bringing jobs to town. We have zillions of open jobs in Tualatin and throughout the whole area. Problem is we're having people, I own a staffing agency, almost 60% of our employees that we're employing in Wilsonville and around here are from the South, Woodburn, Aurora, even as far as Salem, because it's better wages here. But now the gas is high, it's becoming even more of a problem to get them here. How are any efforts being made towards affordable housing in all of this?
Yes. So when this plan is adopted, it has to follow prior council policies. So council last year adopted the housing production strategy. I hate to say this, but as a document, it's not a great inspiring read, but it's got really good bullet points. So we have to focus based on what Oregon or what that plan provides is we have to provide, or at least work towards, housing that provides to 60 to 120% of the Washington County median income. So that's roughly like $40,000 to $80,000 for salary for rent per se. And what that means is if this plan gets adopted, council every year or every few years will actively work to recruit or to incentivize housing that meets those requirements in that plan. And one of those is it has to have a number of units dedicated to 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%. And it also has to be near major transportation and quality of life amenities. And there are a few spots around this area that would provide that. Secondly, council, as well as our internal discussions with finance, have indicated that it is also a priority to leverage broader funding mechanisms. So partner with Metro, partner with the state, partner with private development, and kind of wrap that into a wholesome, complete package on what we're trying to accomplish, which is more housing. But with, like you were saying, we don't necessarily need more jobs, but we do need to keep people near like mixed use development. So commercial on the bottom, housing on the top. That way people have access to quality of life amenities. So it's kind of like how do I say this? It's kind of like a complete community where we have to follow state regulations on keeping housing near what they call regional village centers, which is basically downtowns or town centers. And that's Metro defined. And that's another thing we also have to keep in mind, that not only are we playing by county rules, we're playing by Metro, we're playing by state, and we're playing by federal when we start talking about housing. So this plan per se will focus on housing and mixed use development, but it's also focusing on planning for that as well. So it's kind of like the funding document to do the work in the future.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question. So you've a couple of times correlated housing has to be linked up with major transportation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, what is major transportation? Is it a bus?
Okay, so it could be. It also could be next to a highway. I will say this, and our working group heard this last week, and Kathy can kind of chime in on her reaction. But we're technically, the city no longer has to require a number of parking for housing development based on state statutes. It's a new law that went into place where we don't have to require, we cannot require a certain number of parking for housing development. And that was a huge land use debate at the state level. So as a result, we have to keep housing development, and this does not apply to commercial development or industrial development, it's only for housing. We have to keep them closer to parking, existing parking, to existing transportation, and to major transportation networks. Now, I will say that in this particular plan document, when projects start kind of getting rolled out for community feedback, council has indicated parking is a priority. And so we need to figure out how to make those components work.
Thank you.
I will chime in. I don't think I used profanity, but I'm pretty sure I felt profanity. When they're talking about affordable housing, a logical place would be where there is bus service. And the bus service is in the core area and along with the train service. Well, they can put affordable housing in or other housing in and not have any parking, or at least not required by the city. The developer, I'm sure, would have to think about, gee, I have clients who are going to use this facility, but as a general rule, it's been the city that's been enforcing adequate parking. So I think it puts a burden on cities to provide parking for concentrated housing. But that was my comment. My profanity in my brain, but not in, I just think this is going to make things that much harder. But that was the view I shared. If someone disagrees, this is the time to say it, but that was my view.
Other questions?
Okay, go on, Jonathan. We lost one participant, so, oh well.
Okay, so really the timeline is as such. We've been, even though this is this year, we've been working on this since 2018 through various discussions and also through other various projects. Between January and April, we started talking about the boundary and the fiscal impact analysis with our consultants. That also led to conversations with our taxing districts, as well as internal conversations of deferred impacts or deferred revenues and the current impacts on our municipal budget. And right now, what we're doing is we proposed a list of projects just for initial reaction to our working group last week. And Kathy kind of delineated the major points of our $85 million proposal. And we're also doing a multiple advisory groups that are being consulted, including this one. By July, at the end of July, going into August, the draft project list will be available for public review. It'll be on our website. It will list specifically each individual project, even though right now we're saying, you know, transportation, 12 million. We'll actually have the projects that we intend to do with this plan. One, we can, you know, like, can kind of say, like, without putting the cart before the horse, we have administrative cost, and over 30 years we've anticipated between 7 and 8 million, which is, you know, insurance, staffing, recruitment efforts, all those things rolled into one. So that's like the only one that we have definitively put down. Then in August, we are required by law to confer with all of our regional partners in the preparation of this final plan. We've had a little bit of a scheduling conflict with the county, but we're trying to schedule that over the next week and a half, 2 weeks. TVF&R, who is a vital partner in this process, is on our working group. Our county, Clackamas County, because currently right now we're a bifurcated plan area. We'll meet with them as well as our school districts. And then if during that 45-day window, council will have a public hearing, and then the adoption could occur in November of 2022, with the plan going into effect of December of 2022. Public engagement is really important. We've been working on this, like I said, since 2018. Right now, we're having our working groups meet. We're doing our stakeholder interviews in June and July. Community presentations have been going on since April, including this one, and it will go through August. And we have a technical advisory committee, but it's more so individuals that are technical in their areas of expertise, consulting the plan document kind of on a one-on-one basis. So real 3 key takeaways. This does not increase property tax rates. It will be on your tax bill, but it will be a different line item. But it will be the difference between what the normal taxing districts would have gotten vis-a-vis the urban renewal tax line. Boundary and projects are still in formation with ongoing community discussions, and we believe in private market-led development focused. So we don't want to do any projects that doesn't have long-term market viability. We want this to be successful not only for today's community, but also in 30 years. We'll do another round of questions if you have any more. What we can say, for example, Basalt Creek was passed last year. It's $53 million, and it really is focused on greenfield development. So if any of you kind of understood or understand the history of Leventon, which is the Lamb JE area, that's exactly what we're trying to focus Basalt Creek to be, greenfield development, industrial development. As compared to this one, if any of you remember, this urban renewal area transitioned a dog food factory to the town commons, but it also helped spur development that, you know, got rid of a certain business that everyone wanted to get rid of that didn't serve alcohol. But urban renewal has been very successful in the city of Tualatin. I'm going to pull up just 3 more slides that are not in this slide deck, but it kind of gives you an idea of what the city is going to try to do if this is approved. So originally in this area, Central Urban Renewal District was established in 1975. Like I said, it ceased collections in 2009, 2010, and it was terminated in 2020. But it was to alleviate blight in the downtown. It increased the valuation by 180 million. And some of those major projects included the Commons, the bypass at Tualatin Sherwood Road, Nybridge Street, and I-5 interchange, more parking and local street improvements. Leventon Tax Increment District, it is still an active district, but it ceased collections in 2009. The purpose was to open new lands for industrial employment. It increased valuation by 255 million, and those major projects included the 124th, the entire Herman Road at the time, water, sewer, storm, electric infrastructure. Back in the day, because this district was so successful, is we recruited businesses to the area in addition to funding infrastructure. And then the Herman Road Extension Project, which is taking where the nicer, wider part of Herman Road where it gets narrow, it's going to do that all the way to the Tualatin Road intersection. And then the Southwest and Basalt Creek development area, we're toying with a name in order to have an acronym, so it's easier for not only council, staff, budget, as well as the community. But it's to do the same thing what we did in Leventon, to increase employment land capacity. And we're focusing on water, sewer infrastructure, road development, trail development, and natural resource protection. And so that's what we intend to do in this area based on community needs of housing and transportation, as well as environmental protection, natural resource protection, etc.
We do have a question in chat. What does it mean when you talk about small business support? What does that mean
That's actually a great question. So in the plan proposed projects right now, we've identified about $3 million dedicated and allocated to small business assistance. And what those kind of assistance is, it's small business grants for capital development. So permanent projects that affect the valuation of your business, i.e. facade improvements, windows improvements, foundation stabilizers. I mean, Elaine can talk. She's probably see a lot more than just facade improvements, but any kind of project that increases the valuation of your property, but that is a permanent fixture. So it couldn't be to pay payroll or anything like that.
So are these grants or loans, or how do they work, Elaine?
Well, Jonathan, it depends on which, every city is different. And it depends on what works in that city. So some cities do very low interest loans so that they get that money back, and then they can recycle that to give it to another business. Other cities have found that no one was taking out their loans because they couldn't afford it. So they did grants. So that program would have to be developed by the city and targeted to what kinds of things they wanted. But in terms of thinking about, Jonathan did a good job of saying what kinds of improvements. And when you think about that, we usually say sticks and bricks. So it's something that is a capital improvement to the building. So our urban renewal is limited by the laws that govern it to not being able to pay things like Jonathan said, operating costs or payroll or insurance or that kind of stuff. It's limited to capital expenditures.
Any other questions? Well, I want to thank the city councilors who have joined us today. Bridget Brooks, and I don't know if Christine is still on or not, but I want to thank you guys for being here. Yeah, there you are. Do you guys have anything you want to add?
I'll just say hi everybody. And I had another meeting right beforehand. So, but I just want to thank Jonathan for his work on this, and the council's been generally, from my experience, supportive of this, and but we're really interested in what the community thinks and says about this, and so please keep talking to us, and attending those meetings. Not everybody's on the committee, but the meetings are public, I believe. So everyone's welcome to attend. And this would be, in my opinion, so good for our city to help our businesses keep strong and to help our community be more connected.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Kathy. So I wanted to join today because I was really interested in hearing what questions and concerns people had. So I just wanted to thank you for allowing me to sit in and listen. And I am also on the committee with Kathy. And so I have a huge vested interest in hearing everybody's thoughts and opinions and ideas. So if anything does come up, please feel free to reach out. And I just really want to hear from everybody on what thoughts and ideas are out there. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, Jonathan, does Don have an additional presentation, or was he here as a resource?
We had him around. We were saying, like, just sit there and look like you're doing something. But no, we had Don here just in case if there was any questions, particularly about impacts to the city, kind of anything that could be answered through a financial lens. And we wanted to make sure that we had that resource available if those questions were asked.
Well, I think this has been a good overview. I want to thank the city for preparing it. I believe everyone who wasn't familiar with it has a better understanding of how it works based on the questions that are in chat. It looks like we've exhausted the current questions, and then I think if more come up, we'll tackle them. We'll be glad to bring your questions to the working group, or you can contact Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan, do you want to give him your phone number?
Yeah, so what I'll do is, are you going to be sending out like a recap of this meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so I will send two things. It's a link to our education series that we did for council. It's online, so if you really are bored and you want to get into the nitty gritty of urban renewal, you can watch 4 of those videos on YouTube. But also, I will send out my email to Kathy as well. We intend to do individual stakeholder outreaches. So if you're a particular business within this area that want to go to lunch or to coffee and share your concerns, comments, questions, we can do that. We got one scheduled this Thursday. We're also going to be doing an open house in July and August. It'll probably be online just because of kind of the current environment of people wanting to social distance currently, just to kind of respect that. But we also will do individual small group stakeholder interviews with Elaine, our consultant, in July and August to get feedback off those projects. And we'll send out how you can get involved with that because there'll be multiple options. So a lot of public engagement, a lot of opportunity for participation. But if you don't want to do all that and just want to talk to myself or Elaine, I'll send you my email through Kathy so you can just kind of get back with me.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. Why don't we pull up the wrap-up slides, Megan? I'm going to, we have a minimum requirement to do an election, and today's meeting doesn't have enough. So I'm going to have a second member meeting to confirm this vote, which I'll do. This has happened before. Our group is an all volunteer group. Everyone on this call is what, if you have a business in Tualatin and you'd like to be one of the volunteers, please speak up now, or you can speak up later. I'm going to turn this over because we actually have to have an election of the board to Scott Miller, who's going to take the gavel over because I'm the first person on the list. And anybody who would like to run against me, this would be the time to bring up your name. Scott, do you want to take over? You're on mute, Scott. still on mute.
There we go. Is that better?
Mm,
Okay, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll take it. I nominate you to be president again, Kathy.
And if there's any other nominations.
I second that one.
I don't have a gavel.
Okay,
Do I have to vote now?
sure.
Do we vote? So who,
Raise your hand is how we've been doing it. These
does
silly.
anybody not think that she should be president? Anyone want to vote for somebody else? Okay, I think we're good.
Okay. All right. We now are going to go to the Vice President Land Use Officer. And Scott has been filling the role. Scott, why don't you tell us a little bit about you so they know who they're voting for?
I'm a commercial real estate broker, and I do a lot of work in Tualatin. And Kathy and I got introduced to the CIO from Kathy because we were having problems with the zoning in some downtown area, and the CIO spent 2 years fixing that, and it was a huge deal for us. And so I am sticking around trying to pay it back.
Great. All right. Would anyone? I nominate Scott. Does anybody have any other nominations they'd like to advance?
Second.
Okay. Everybody in favor? Oh, anyone not in favor of Scott taking this role? All righty. Robert Kellogg. Robert, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself? I will mention Robert's a former city council and an attorney here in town, and he's been on our board before. Robert?
Well, thank you, Kathy. I'm a Scorpio. No, looking forward to serving if elected. As you mentioned, I was on city council. I've been on the sidelines for a year and a half, 2 years, probably not as far on the sidelines as I wanted, but anyway, excited to get involved again in a official capacity. And these are truly important issues for our city. I mean, what economic development does for us every day makes it a bigger and better city and improved. And so I think any effort we put towards it will be well spent.
Thank you, Robert. So I nominate Robert, or the board actually does. We're advancing it. Anyone not in favor of Robert? Well, there's nothing in the chat. No one's raised their hand. Did we have a second to his nomination, Scott? Okay, I read lips. He seconded it.
I would second it also.
Okay, second. We'll go ahead. Everyone who's in favor of Robert. We're not Robert. I guess that's the way we're doing it. Negative. All right. Robert, you're back on the board. We have a open board member, which is we have another position available if anybody would like to self-nominate. Chris Nyberg Tunstall has a large family real estate interest in Tualatin, as she's lived in Tualatin all her life and has been a member of the CCIO since the beginning. The board would like to nominate her to continue on as a board member. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to be nominated to run against Chris? Hearing none, we'll go ahead. Anyone who doesn't want Chris on the board, raise your hand. We have a process. Okay. So Chris, you've been renominated and voted on. Is there anybody else who would like to join our merry group of volunteers on the board?
I would.
Okay, Kent. Kent, what's your last name?
Drang Schultz.
Drang Schultz.
Yeah, DRANGSHOLT.
Okay, well, I think we have a place to meet for our meetings at the Garage Eatery and Tap House on McEwen.
Absolutely.
All right. Is there a second? Oh, Kent, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I've owned these businesses up in Beaverton and recently moved them down here to Tualatin. Because of urban renewal development of the building, I had to move out. I'm in the McEwen Road area, and I'm very interested in being involved with the city and the community. We're a culture center, really, because we also have a live music venue where we have live music every night from local musicians. And we offer the stage to beginners to absolute pros like Curtis Salgado and national bands are going to be coming in. So we think we are offering Tualatin a nice cultural addition, as well as my other business, which is the Garage Sale Warehouse, which is an antiques and collectibles mall. And we have 75 vendors in there that are bringing in wares from around the Northwest, and sales have been good. So I guess the community likes it.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Is there a second for Kent's? There's a second. Okay. If you're not in favor of Kent, raise your hand. I see no one. All right. Welcome to the board, Kent.
Yay.
And we have a place to meet, guys.
Yes, absolutely. We have seating for 220 people, so plenty of the community could come around if you have some of your larger meetings.
Well, there's only 5 of us, so
All right, then.
a round table. And we have some of our best discussions over certain brews. So it sounds like you'd be a good fit for us.
We can make that happen.
All right. All right. Any other new business that anybody would like to bring up, or anything anyone would like us to look into? Well, we targeted 4:30 for adjournment, but it's 4:10. So I'm going to say this meeting's adjourned, hearing no objection. And I hear none. Okay, we're adjourned.
Thanks, Kathy.
Megan,
Thank you, Kathy.